Hello, everybody, and welcome to this live stream. My name is Curtis. I'm going to be your host today. I'm with Clover Press, and we are going to be talking about this amazing graphic novel called Project MK Ultra. And I am going to be speaking with the three creators, Stewart Kenneth Moore, Brandon Beckner, and Scott Sampila. So I'm going to bring them onto the screen so we can talk to all of them. Here's Stewart, and here's Brandon, and here's Scott.
Hello.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Glad to have you here.
Hello.
So,
Thank you.
if any of you have any comments, we'll be taking or any questions. We'll be taking questions that from any of you over on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching. Just leave a comment, and we'll try and answer your questions. So, I want to just talk to each one of you individually to start. Find out who you are, how you got into comics, and what brought you to MK Ultra. So, Stewart, let's start with you.
Okay, so I've had a lifelong love of comics that was kicked off by reading 2008, really as a serious thing when I was about 13, 12. And I really started thinking about drawing comics, becoming a comic artist. But it really it lit the touch paper for art for me. So I didn't just go into comics. I did a lot of different art things, graphic design, painting, and so forth. But yeah, it was quite a few years before I came back to comics and started to think I really want to, do this and pursue this kind of lifelong dream. And yeah, so eventually working for 2000 AD, that thing that started that sort of lit the touch paper, and Judge Dredd, doing Judge Dredd and various things. And so that's how I got into comics. I love the medium. I love the comics. So.
And we'll see some of your Judge Dredd work. We're going to show
yeah.
a few samples a little bit later on in the show, and I'm excited to share that because it's some really fantastic stuff. Okay, let's go on to Scott down below here.
Yeah.
Scott, tell me about yourself.
Well, I've been friends with Brandon for over 30 years now, and we've been collaborating on various creative projects really since we met. Started out with short films, we did a musical, we eventually made a feature film, and then we wrote MK Ultra. We wrote the first incarnation of this script, 15 plus years ago, and it's always kind of been our baby. It's always been our grand master plan to see this realized into either a movie or these days we'd love to see it turn into a limited series. But during the course of that process, we found Stewart, and Stewart transformed our old screenplay into this incredible graphic novel. So this is our first foray into the graphic novel world through Stewart. We've known him for many, many years as well. When we first met him, he was just a painter, if I recall. And then just his work on this book has just been unbelievable. So
excellent. Now, unless you're embarrassed about these films in the past, why don't you tell us some of the names of them?
Well, the main movie that Brandon and I did, it was a feature film called Remarkable Power. It had quite a few sort of B-level stars: Kevin Nealon, Tom Arnold, Kip Pardue, Dule Hill, Nora Zahedner. Traveled the world at film festivals, got a small theatrical release, wound up on Showtime.
Nice.
We recently actually took back the distribution of it, are going to kind of re-release it on a streaming platform here in the next few months.
Cool. Oh, fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
Brendan, how about you?
Well, my story is pretty much the same as Scott's. He just pretty much nailed it. So I have another project I'm working on. It started as a multimedia stage show. It's kind of a rock music experience, and I'm just turning that into a movie right now. Yeah. So I'm coming off the editing process of that, and
your poster's right behind you.
Yeah, there it is.
There you go.
But it's also kind of similar to Remarkable Power. It's going to be rebranded because we found a distributor already for it. And he's also taken Remarkable Power. So,
great.
Couple things going on. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, just getting distribution is hard. And this guy, his name is John Kim, and he's extreme. He's like probably one of the only honest guys in the business. So it's wonderful to have someone that you can trust, and if the films do well, we'll know about it. It won't be hidden away in some Hollywood accounting. So that's kind of what I'm up to right now, along with MK Ultra, the potential TV show or a movie version that Scott and I have been working on for a while, and Stewart as well.
So. I mean, there's been some things cooking with that for quite some time, and the release of the graphic novels helping, and volume 2 comes out. It's eventually going to be one full volume. So hopefully within the next several months, we'll realize our Hollywood dreams to get that show made.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go around the circle, and I want each of you to tell me, what is MK Ultra? Like, describe the story in one sentence. Okay,
Wow.
one sentence. Stewart, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I partly get this from Brandon and Scott, but basically, yeah, they told me this bit, but it's mind control, weaponized mind control during the Cold War, to try and come up with a number of different things: a Manchurian candidate, assassins who could kill but not remember having killed, people who couldn't be cracked under torture because they didn't remember having done the things they did, and the use of LSD, the attempted use of LSD to do that ended up kicking off the counterculture in San Francisco.
That's longer than one sentence.
Yeah, that's not sense. And
Really,
Punctuation.
put it into yours.
Right.
It's a
Well, you
long-
forgot. What you forgot to mention is that it was a secret CIA-backed program
That's true.
that was basically testing LSD on people unwittingly as a potential mind control drug in the Cold War. That's ultimately what the basic idea was, but it just became so much more than that.
Obviously,
Yeah,
the
so-
writer has a better way of sentence structure.
Unless Brandon could probably add a little bit to that.
I would say it's kind of like the Dr. Strangelove title, MK Ultra, or how the CIA inadvertently created the LSD-fueled peace and love movement.
Yeah, there you go.
That's good. That's good too.
That's great. Yeah. So this first volume, this is going to be a 2-volume series from Clover Press, right? And the
Yeah.
first volume is out. It's available, ready for people to purchase, Amazon, wherever you want to go. And oh, there's a copy of it right there. Beautiful book. A nice hardcover, full color pages, and we'll show you some artwork up close in a little bit. But because it just holding it up doesn't do it any justice. You got to see this artwork up close. And the second volume will be coming out soon. It's not quite ready yet. You're still working on it, right, Stewart?
No, it's done, but I was late.
Oh, it's done.
I was late to get it to Clover, so I was meant to get it to them in the middle of January, but I didn't get it until I think the middle of February. So that pushed the initial. We were looking to have it on shelves by the end of July.
Yeah.
But I think, and I haven't inquired, but I think it's August. But I don't know.
It's coming very soon, so
Yeah.
we'll keep an eye out for that. And we have some sample preview art that we're going to show you all a little bit later as well. But first, before we do that, I want to talk to Scott and Brandon. How did you, why are you interested in this subject? What was so fascinating about it to you?
Well, mind if I tell the story, Brandon? We always
Yeah.
kind of tell this basic origin story where
Let's mix it
Brandon
up.
called. Brandon called me one day and just out of the blue goes, and we had been writing screenplays for several years at this point. We were kind of looking for our new project. And he goes, "Hey man, have you ever heard of something called NK Ultra?" He had the name wrong. I'm like, no. And he said, "Well, I just listened to NPR, and apparently Jerry Garcia was given acid by the CIA for the first time." And I was like, that sounds fucking crazy. So let's look into that. In which we kind of just went down the rabbit hole from there. At the time, the internet was not what it is now. Research was not quite as vibrant and full, and the various websites that exist now. But so we read books. There was 2 primary sources of information. One was called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, written by a guy named John Marks in the late 70s. And there was another book called Acid Dreams, written by a couple guys in the 80s. And that just kind of laid out this whole thing. And once we kind of read about there being a whorehouse that was backed by the CIA, that was kind of the tipping point. It was like, okay, we got to tell this story. And
Yeah.
probably spent a good research year, Brandon, something like that, before we even started writing.
At least, yeah.
And then just kind of it's evolved. Even the story has changed. Our screenplays changed even more so over the past 15 years and turned into a longer form narrative that even Stewart wrote. But
Yeah.
it's a pretty rich story. So
And we
it's easy
decided
to
to
dive in.
take like a fictional approach with
Yeah.
the main couple characters that are propelling the story. They're made up, somewhat based maybe on some real guys, but the whole thing takes place in a world that was it all happened. It was based on real events, so it's partially fictionalized but mostly true. And the weirdest stuff is the true stuff by far.
Yeah.
True.
Okay, we'll get into that weird stuff in a little bit, but can you tell me what was the research process like? Because I can't imagine, like, if this is supposed to be the top super secret thing, how did you find out all of this information?
Well, it was kind of early days, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of early Google days. You know, was not as easy as it is now, and there wasn't as much stuff available. So most of it was, you know, so in the early 70s, whenever it was, when the program was almost about to be outed, Helms had basically ended up probably about 90% of all the documents destroyed. So there's only a little bit left over, and just based on those, and then maybe some stories that got handed down, you know, from people that were really involved. There was just little bits of stuff here and there. There are a couple books that Scott and I read were a big help, but we actually did a lot of online research where, you know, you just find one little snippet of something, and then you kind of like cross-reference that, and you eventually like, whoa,
articles,
you know, a couple articles pop up, or some very deep sort of, you know, so it was, you know, we ended up with like a stack this big. I can't show it. It's so big I can't even show it. Of just printouts of paperwork. I mean, this is, you know, back when we actually printed out stuff, and yeah, so it took us, you know, quite a while just to get the facts straight and what at least we believed really happened. And then we landed on this, they called it Operation Midnight Climax. And that was like, just blew our minds. It was so insane. You know, it involved like the CIA, you know, moving the whole op from DC to San Francisco because they had mafia connections there, and they could sort of do it, you know, under the radar. And they built these fake brothels, and they had a famous magician named John Mulholland teach prostitutes how to, like, with sleight of hand, slip acid into guys' drinks. They would go to bars, lure these guys back to these fake brothels, dose them, and then the CIA guys are hanging out behind these two-way mirrors, sipping martinis and smoking cigars and watching the whole thing. And we're like, all right, now we got a movie. Now we got to.
You know, it still blows me away that this project isn't better known. You know. Yeah. I still ask people, like, you know, when the book came out, I asked, telling them about, have you ever heard of this thing? And I'm amazed at how few people have heard of it when it actually happened. And we'll talk about this a bit more. I imagine it falls in this conspiracy theory sort of vibe, but it's not. It's real. So, but it still gets tagged with that somehow. It's bizarre.
Yeah. It's like Bigfoot, MK Ultra, UFOs.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but Bigfoot's in number 2.
Of course he is.
He's very well hidden, but he's there.
Stewart's got all sorts of Easter eggs in there.
Okay, Stewart, I want you to tell me then, how did you get involved in this project?
Okay, so a long time ago, I hadn't seen Beckner and Scott in years and years, but they came back to Prague, and there's a fantastic beer garden in Prague called Ledna. And we met there for some beers, and we were talking about things. And I guess this is something for my nerdish credentials, because they said, I was asking them what they were up to. They were talking about the scripts they'd written, and then they mentioned MK Ultra, and Brandon said, "Have you heard of that?" And I said, "I have heard of that." You know, so they said, "Wow, you know anybody who's heard of this?" But I had heard of it, but I was sketchy on the particulars. I didn't know anything about Midnight Climax or the John Mulholland insanity, hiring a magician to write a manual for espionage, which is fantastic. You can actually get that on Amazon, by the way. But so that all happened there, and at the beer garden, and then it was like we talked about it, and over a couple of years, I guess I asked them if they'd let me look at the script because it sounded so interesting, and then I was like, this never mind making a movie. This is a graphic novel. You know, this we can do more with graphics. We can do more with art than we can do. You need a budget. You need a massive budget maybe to make a film the way I'm seeing it.
For sure.
So I'm looking at it. The first thing that happens is you've got this kind of pop-up scene where it's in book 1 where the scientist Hoffman is going through a kind of river, and there's all these crazy things happening. So that was all in a lot of that was in the script. I mean, what I've done would have taken it somewhere else, but it was a very rich set of images that were right there in the script to make me think, what is this? So I thought it was hilarious as well. That's the other thing that's very good about it. It's kind of cocking a snook at a lot of this stuff. You know, it's like laughing at the insanity of it. You know, you're very well aware of the earnestness of these guys, but at the same time, it's completely mental. And maybe you shouldn't say that word. That's probably the wrong word these days.
Yeah.
It's bizarre and mad, and so so eventually I had time, and I saw an opening, and I got very excited about doing a graphic novel of it, and the guys liked the idea, so I started doing it, and I thought very naively that I'd do about 15 pages, and then somebody would see how good it was, and we'd get a publisher. But that never, so I had to keep that bar that I'd
took
set.
a little longer.
Yeah, a little longer. I had to keep plowing on. Every time I got a chance, I would go and do some pages, and then I'd get a job and get some money.
Hey, Stu, didn't you at first, right off the bat, do a sketch out the whole thing? I feel like you sketched out the whole thing really fast. Like,
yeah, I did. That's right.
Full
That's absolutely right, Scott. I did 260 pages, lettered in a colored sketchbook. So the whole book was done in a very cartoonish way in 1 month, and it was all lettered, and then I sent it to Brandon and Scott so they could read the script and see how the images played, and then that would also give me a page number so I could see, because you know, when you start reading the script, you actually don't know how many pages it's going to be when you draw it. So I thought, I'll just draw it, and then I'll count the pages, and then figure out what I can edit out, and then start the finished art. And so that's precisely what I did. Scott's absolutely right. There's this document, which is, I think, interesting to me anyway. It'll be interesting to some people that it's very similar to the book, but it's entirely schematic, and it's like the storyboard of the comic.
How closely did you follow the sketchbook?
Really close. I mean, I'm surprised at how close, and that really helped me some places. You know, there's places where I looked at it, and there's a couple of sections I just X'd out because I'd gone too far. I'd gone way into the weeds, but it gave me an opportunity to sort of, you know, see everything, play everything, do everything I wanted to do that was in my head and that was on the script. And that's the other thing I want to say is that I followed the script sort of scene for scene, like a director would. You know, you look at the scene and you say, well, they've written this, but how am I going to shoot it? And then I would carry it through, like, you know, scene for scene. So I would have and if there was, the other thing was that sometimes, because you're translating a film script, in a film, people can speak and the words just disappear. They're very quick. But in a comic, that can become too much. It can be too dominant on the page. So I started finding ways to go, like, do things like went out the window. So there's a scene in book one, where I go out the window and you see this pigeon, and you sort of understand the pigeon's kind of listening a wee bit, you know. So it's like playing at the paranoia, and then you pull out, and the actual sections of the building look like a acid block. So playing games with like visuals and graphics, and just allowing, I'm taking everything Brandon and Scott said and wrote, but I'm going out the window and up in the sky, and there was a few key references to this character's love of Superman when he was a child. So I made loads and loads of allusions to early American comics, just because of that, because I felt that was in his subconscious. So that was about.
One thing I'll also say is, like, Stewart's interpretation of the script is there's so much funny stuff in there, like just these little bits and pieces that you're just like, what the hell, man? That's great. It's just I wish I had examples, but there's just so many little bits of humor in there.
It's basically all like
really cool.
Maybe it was 20 years ago, Stewart, when you showed, and I still laugh about it to this day whenever I think about it. And it was just this little strip you did of some drunk guy on a Segway. That was so, I don't know. I was like, this guy, this guy just turns MK it's going to be a comedy for sure.
It's classic.
There's a story behind that. I was doing work for Esquire at the time, and actually, no, I wasn't. I wasn't doing anything for Esquire. But my friend and I were really into like technology, and we saw this thing was coming on. It was called IT. You know, it was some new secret device that people transported. But my buddy Tomas, he said, why don't we just check the newspapers didn't know what it was, but he said, why don't we just check the USPTO website and see what's been filed? Because it'll be there. The patent will be there. So we looked, immediately we realized it was a scooter. So we knew about the Segway a year before it was news. It was hype about some floating device, but it turned out to be a scooter. So I was telling my wife about it, and I said, you know, it can go upstairs on its own, and it self-balances. And she said, so it must be good for drunks then. Drunks, right?
There you go. There's the inspiration.
Best idea in the world. So I sort of drew it, you know, and I posted it to a few pals. And one of my mates said, look, send it to Esquire. They're going to love that. So I sent it to Esquire, and they immediately called me, which is weird. They phoned me up. We'd love to use your cartoon. I was like, oh, that's great, you know. So that was fine, and they paid me exactly the same amount of money they paid Hemingway for his first contribution, $250.
Cool.
Back in the day, it was worth more money.
Yeah.
You know, with the insult, to add insult to injury, there's no injury, but there's an insult, because at the end, when it was published in the magazine, they said we decided to send a reporter out and test the Segway drunk, and then they applied as an illustrator.
Wow.
Which is the case. It was my wife that came up with that idea. So.
Maybe that's how that's how George Bush wiped out. It might have been.
Yeah, oh yeah. Not hard enough, unfortunately.
Well, the cool thing about what Stewart's doing is that, you know, like when Scott and I are thinking of this thing as a movie, like Stewart gets to or had the opportunity to be like the director, the editor, the production designer. You know, all the detail that he had to research. Like production designers will spend months and months and months just researching all little details, especially of period movies. You know, they got to have all that stuff right, and so you know, it must have been quite an experience. You know?
It was a lot, but you know, it had to be done right, and you got to do a job right. You know, if you're gonna do something like that, you got to do it right. So.
And this book is actually 2 period pieces, because half of it takes place in the 50s and the other half takes place in the 70s. Like you're interspersing these scenes because the main story, the present day, is told in the 1970s, and the rest of it's in the flashback. So you'd have to do research on these 2 different eras.
Well, it even goes into the 60s. The late 60s is explored quite a bit too. So it's kind of like about a 15-year window, and you know, from 53 to the late 60s, it's only 15 years, but that was a lot of change for back then. You know, every couple of years, everything's totally different. You know? Car designs completely changed year to year. Like now, I can't even tell the difference between today and 20 years ago.
Yeah, but you know, San Francisco in the early 70s is just bonkers on like cultural and color and music and people. It was just so rich with that stuff, and you know, Stewart did an amazing job capturing that still blows me away when I look at it. Thank you.
There's a guy that I tried to link between the 2 periods, and he's a guy that we see in the beginning of book 1. He's standing in the corner and he's saying Klatu Barada Nekto, right? Klatu Barada Nekto, right? Which is the famous line from the old science fiction film.
Yeah, when the Earth stood still, right?
Yeah, it's the when the Earth stood still, and it's got a Czech connection because the first use of the word robot comes from Czech, so it's robota, and so they put in that nekto as a sort of reference to Czech, and so Klatu Barada Nekto. The guy's standing there and he's all strung out and sweating, and he's a drug casualty. But so you see him in 1971 in the background of this scene where Seymour is approached by this crazy pimp in his record store. But if later in the book, if you're paying attention, the same guy is seen again in 1953 or 54, and he's much younger and he's not strung out, but he's a victim of this program, and they drop him. This guy with a conscience says, take him to a doctor. They say, okay, we'll take him to a doctor. They don't. They dump him at a drive-in movie, like on the outskirts of a drive-in movie, and they drive away. And then the camera pulls back, and you see it's the day the Earth stood still. Klatu Barada Nekto. So
right
between those 2 periods, right there.
Okay, let's take a look at some of this artwork. Here's the cover of the book. This is volume 1, and I'll show you the cover of volume 2 a little bit later. But a great image, because this is it doesn't really tell you anything, but there's something going on. I love the splash of color right in just going up the front of this guy here. This is the first page. Yeah. And what I love about your artwork as well is that you have a few different styles that you implement depending on what the scene is or what's called for. So this whole thing opens like a 1950s science fiction movie, and I love it. It's a great intro.
Thank you.
Anything you want to say about this page here?
there was, I mean, I did the usual thing. I put a lot of stuff into it. You know, the reference to Bicycle Day is the day that Hoffman's people
This
sell.
is true. Oh.
Yeah, and it was the day he rode his bike and he was accidentally ingested LSD. He didn't know it existed. He kind of discovered it, invented it. Then the spiral pattern on the back wall is a Russian scientist's version of the periodic table. So we've got the periodic table that we know, but some guy in Russia, some wonderful scientist, came up with this amazing spiral design. So that's what that is. And then, I guess the first reference to Sandoz is there on the jar. But yeah, that's.
And I think we had discussed even in making the eventual movie, that we would start it off black and white, so it would have that kind of old school feel. And then when Hoffman gets on his bike and starts heading home and has the world's first LSD trip, bam, it just turns into color. Yeah, exactly.
There it is.
And I love that. So this is a progression right in the middle of his trip right here, and the pages going through, it's like it has a great progression of going from black and white to this complete insanity. So I just need to know, how did you come to visualize an LSD trip on the page here?
Okay, so full disclosure, I've never taken LSD. If I did, I would tell you.
Stewart doesn't need LSD.
Yeah, no kidding.
Maybe I don't. But so I've never taken it. So I had to speak to people and asked a bunch of friends. There's a bunch of people I know, and one guy, a good mate of mine, who was actually there and got acid apparently from Owsley Stanley, pops up in the book. So I spoke to a bunch of people and I read about a bunch of different experiences. And what I decided was I was going to go much more visual than it actually probably would be, because I guess what I was doing was kind of what I think I would probably see if I was on LSD, you know. So I feel like you kind of have to be magical realist a little bit, because from what I was reading, people don't have the classic, you know, complete disruption of the universe sort of experience. But so I was going magical realist with that to try and get him back into the lab and find out what was wrong, because part of his mind in this scene is still trying to work on the problem. What am I experiencing? But he's having this horrible experience. In fact, if you look very closely, even his teeth are speaking to him. So he's doing the teeth of speech bubbles. They're all like offering advice, which I don't think would happen. So I just had a lot of fun with it.
Well, also visually, I mean, if you think about, you know, like maybe, depending on what acid you had, I guess, but like it wouldn't be look like that, cartoonish or whatever. But all the artwork and all like Yellow Submarine and just all the stuff that, like, you know, even stuff that came later, like Pink Floyd's The Wall, like all the animation, like we just associate animation and crazy animation with
kaleidoscopic colors.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's another reference, is the way people actually painted and drew things back then in the era. But also, I must say that this is kicking off from what was in the script, because there was this whole thing about him going down this river and, you know, mushrooms springing up and strange things springing up. So that's an interpretation of that. And I actually felt at the time that I didn't stay close enough to the visual stuff that was in the script. I kind of went off into other things. But so that's part of what kicked that off.
But you can tell just from this page, and I'll have more examples of this later on, that visualizing this on screen definitely takes a larger budget, because it's like, where you can have one guy just drawing this and it looks amazing. It's going to take a lot of work to get this on the screen.
Sure.
The other thing about that page is either the one before it or the next one, you're on the other side of that bicycle. So you go through his face, and now you're either in this one you're in his head, or in the next one you're in his head. But anyway,
right. So I don't have that page here. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So there's the bicycle's there in the environment, but somewhere in there's a boat on a river, and that pops up in a painting later on. There's a lady who worked. She's a CIA accountant, or she worked in the accounts department, and she's talking about her experiences. And on the back wall, if you look very closely, you can see Hoffman clinging to a boat as he's going through the painting.
There is so much in this that you kind of have to read it a couple times to really get and really pay attention to everything, because there's so much packed in here. Yeah.
But yeah, the purple hand thing, that was kind of a bit of luck. I did this picture and it didn't have the purple hand, but then I read about gay rights protest in San Francisco because Hearst, or the Examiner, who coincidentally our character Seymour works there, and so he's going into the office, and as you can see, there are purple hands on the wall. So they're there because the Examiner published some sort of very negative thing about gay rights and gay rights. There was suddenly a big gay rights protest at Berkeley, and it was called, I think it was called the Day of the Purple Hand or something like this. And apparently people came down with the paint on their hands and they daubed the front of the Hearst building, which is what that is. So there's no photos of that. So I just, and the other thing is that's a reference to Robert Crumb's, the cop talking to the hippie on the street saying move. That's a reference to Robert Crumb's.
Nice.
What's his name? Mr. Natural.
Mr. Natural, yeah. Right.
Who famously has this trip where like a meditation. It's called something like the 719th meditation, and he sits down in a desert, and a whole city gets built up around him, and then a policeman comes up and says, "Hey, move along," and he starts to do that thing, and the whole city collapses, and it's back to a desert, and then he stands up, stretches, and goes, "Oh, it was a good session." So that's a reference to.
That's awesome.
What I love about this page here is it shows the contrast of your different styles. I mean, if you look at this first page we did, and then this page, and then now the realism of this one, you've got like all of your lines are straight, and the detail in this architecture, it's just fantastic. And I also really like your color palette here, which because it really offsets the complete vibrant LSD trip, and then it's like, no, this is reality. It's kind of it's muted, it's boring, and that kind of thing. It works really, really great.
Dirty, yeah.
I just saw something the other day. I love making allusions to people whose work I love, like Crumb and Gilbert Shelton and all these guys. But this looks a lot like there's a motorbike guy and the guy's in the car and stuff. It's very like a Gilbert Shelton album cover he did for the Grateful Dead, and for my sins, I had no idea about it until the other day. If I'd have known about it, I'd have definitely dialed into that. But not the other day, and I said, "Oh my God, that's weird. It's very like this particular page." But yeah, because I'm a big fan of Gilbert Shelton. I've been probably a fan of him since I was like 15.
Fabulous Freak Brothers, yeah.
Wonder Warthog, all that stuff.
There's a lot of musical references through this book. You use music as a narrative. You use it in visual form, and here it's a plot point. And so, was this part of Scott and Brendan your script, or was this a Stewart edition?
Big time. We had tons and tons of songs in the script. Just not that we necessarily expected to get the rights to those songs, but mostly to give the reader.
Well, that's probably why no one
feeling.
Yeah. That's probably why no one's made the movie. All the songs, there's no way.
There's tons of songs in the script.
Yeah,
and which one is this?
Great songs.
I'm trying to read that. What song is in there?
This one is just the reference to the Yes album cover, but there's other ones where the songs are written into the narrative or someone's singing it. And
So I funny thing there, I reading the script, I was completely oblivious to the songs. I was going through, and it wasn't until I was many pages in I realized, oh my God, there's songs written into the script because they would be underneath the text, and somehow I wasn't seeing it, so I had to go back and start adding things. But yeah, so that that's right in from the beginning. But the problem with that was I actually originally in this had the lyrics running right through, but then I spoke to Robbins at Clover, and we were discussing it, and other people as well, and they were saying, I don't know if you get the rights to do that, it could be a lot of money, or maybe they won't mind, but it could be bad for the publication if you do stuff like that, and it could be really expensive. So I had to try and find other ways. So one thing I did was I set up a Spotify account, and I started to put in references to the account. So anyone who wants to read the book and load the account, Spotify, they can hear music, hear references. And it's not just music, it's also got clips from bizarre conversation, one case between Timothy Leary and J. Gordon Liddy. And if you hear it, get it, because they obviously kind of love and hate each other. And it's a wonderful conversation. So on Spotify. But yeah, the music's right in from the beginning. It's almost, I wouldn't say it's a musical, the script, but it's pretty close. It's dialed right in.
But I think that's also really important for the culture that you're trying to convey, to have that, because it plays such a heavy role in defining this era, both of these eras, the 70s and the 50s.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's why we put him in the script, because, you know, when you do a flashback and the first thing you see is, you know, Elvis Presley's Hound Dog, or, you know, you know what the feel is. You know, you're in the 50s,
Jimi Hendrix,
you know, rock around the clock kind of thing, and then you get, you know, late 60s and boom, it's like Voodoo Child, and like, you know, that vibe that's going to be like, you know, Hendrix, late 60s, all stoned, and, you know, so it's just, you know, and, you know, of course, we're always trying to see the movie in our heads too, and, you know, it's like, for us, it's like taking, you know, the dark humor of Dr. Strangelove and the darkness and the mafia, like of Goodfellas, smashing that together with Sergeant Pepper's, and, you know, out comes MK Ultra.
Yeah, there you go. This page is interesting to me because it's so full of panels. There are so many panels on this page, and they all have these different newspaper things. And I've done research with microfilm, and so just the effects that you've given of just him, you know, sliding these microfilms going, it's really great. And so I was wondering, Scott and Brendan, as you did any research, did you do any microfilm research? Do you have to use any of those microfiche machines?
Thankfully, no. But I remember
Awesome.
we did have the internet at our disposal, but I remember doing it way back in college. We had to do stuff when you did research papers, right? But but for that character in the 70s, that was your option to go in 20 years before. You know, you had to go and look at those little roles. So
sure.
What I love about this one is that I can see it if it were a movie, because of all of these small panels. It's like quick cuts, and it's like he's flying through all of these different microfilm newspapers and stuff. Like, it works so well visually, just laying it out there.
Yeah,
I really wanted, I don't know if I quite conveyed it right, but I really wanted his silhouette for that cigarette to go. Because I remember guys, when I was a kid, smoking a fag and cigarette, as you say in the States. Or a fag, I don't know. But the cigarette would move like this when they spoke. It would be in their mouth, jammed tight, and they'd talk through it. Wow.
Right.
And so I always imagined a great little silhouette of that cigarette just moving. And also, he's smoking in a library. I don't know if you'd be allowed to do that, but maybe.
Not today.
Not today.
Not today.
I don't know.
Here's another example of a very different visual style that you employ here. Tell us about this page, Stewart.
Okay, so this is I did this thinking, oh, this would be really obvious, you know, and then I realized after doing it that maybe it's not obvious. But so there's a scene in the script where the guys are brought into this camp. They're going through a bit of a test, and then they're all given a drink and they're given a talk, and then there's a film played, and the film tells them a little bit about certain secret things that are going on. And then after the film is turned off, the guy who's doing the talk comes out and says, okay, the film you just watched, that drug they're talking about, you've just ingested it, and you've got, you know, they've got like 5 minutes to remain composed, because the next 2 or 3 hours is going to be insane. But those who go mental aren't going to be able to stay. They're going to be kicked out of the program. So it's all about how you react under this pressure. So I thought, I know what I could do. Okay, so 2 things. One, I wanted, if you're taking something like LSD, it might kick in before you're told you've been taking it. So as the guy's talking to them, they're drinking this stuff, and the film starts to play, and you see this, which is, of course, insane. No one's going to film a skeleton walking around in the room and stuff. At the very beginnings of the drug kicking in, maybe they're not aware that they're seeing something that's insane. It's not until after the film's over that the guy says, you're doing drugs. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. The second thing is, more importantly, that really only happened because I couldn't get the face of that skeleton, who's a real Nazi, really worked in the death camps, and who really tortured people, and really was on the CIA payroll. And his name was Dr. What was it now? I'm forgetting now. Dr. Well, you see how he is to forget.
Plotner or something?
Dr. Plotner. That's it, Dr. Kurt Plotner.
Yep.
So I couldn't find his face anywhere. So I thought, you know, he worked for Mengele, who was known as the Angel of Death. So I thought, well, a skeletal zombie working for the Angel of Death would work. So that's why he's like that. So,
and I like the cockroach right there
Yeah,
to give it a visual cue.
I wish I didn't have enough panels, but I really would have loved to have a set of panels where the cockroach comes up before he speaks, and then he starts to speak like Hitler, and then it moves away. That would have been, for me, perfect. The cockroach kind of comes out of his eye socket or out of his mouth there like Hitler, and then goes. That would have been just perfect. But but yeah, that's meant to be them watching a film, and they're already, whoever's watching that, whichever one it is, whose mind you're in there, he's already seeing something that's a little bit weirder than he's actually.
Now, Scott and Brandon, when you see a page like this, do you say, "Oh man, this is amazing. I never expected this kind of interpretation," or like, "Oh man, he went a little too far here."
It's always both at the same time.
It's pretty much
too
both.
far, but that's exactly what Stewart does. So.
I think it was pretty early on where we were seeing the pages, we were commenting on them, and it just became clear that this is Stewart's interpretation of what we wrote. We just got to let him do his thing.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah,
there's no need for us to meddle. He's gonna do what he's gonna do, and we love it, So,
yeah, amazing.
I think I think that's turning a weakness into a strength. The weakness being running too far with something, and the strength being, go for it. See where you go with it. See what happens. So as long as I always felt, as long as it stayed to the script and didn't deviate too much from what's in the script, then it should be fine. Blowing it up into more insanity. Yeah, with full budget, so to speak.
Now, I like this page here for a couple of reasons. One, your use of shadows and silhouettes is incredible, and also your very limited color palette with just the blue and the red. Can you tell me anything about this page here?
Okay, so I was in a tricky position because I can't show who that is. So I realized that if I'm going to show this flashback, because in the script, she's talking to the reporter, so we don't see what she's necessarily seeing in her head. But in the comic, I'm trying to show everything. I realized, I can't show some of these people because it'll give certain things away. So how do I do it? So immediately I started thinking, there's got to be silhouettes, and I can't show who these people really are as part of this mystery. It would sort of give the game away too early. So that was the thing about moving to silhouette. And then there's the thing of, if you do a noir type film, you can imagine in a noir films, the headlights and the car passing, and you can see a flicker through the blinds as the car lights are passing. And it's very limited palette. It's very low, high contrast, but kind of limited palette of black and white. But in this case, I wasn't going to go back to black and white because we're into the color world now. But so just keeping it, and I think the colors were an accident because I think I was laying down. I do a flat color first, and then I start working on top of that. And I must have made a mistake. And I learned very early on as a student that you make a mistake that's good, you keep it. So, because I did something when I was a student one time, and it was accidentally put something on top of something else, and it looked fantastic. Not to me, but to my lecturer. He was like, "Stay with that," and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I learned then, okay, just if it works, go with it.
So I think this works. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. What else
It's
you got?
it's a bit intentional, but it was accidental sort of.
Back to some acid stuff.
Oh yeah.
So this page is great because we see the progression of going from totally normal to absolutely insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah, this is when they were dosing their friends, so they were dosing each other in the program, and nobody
just
knew.
For kicks.
Yeah, give me a cup of coffee, and it's
early days of the program.
Enjoy the day, Woo. So there's a Batman reference I think in here because the Penguin gives his name, but I think, I may be wrong, but I think the name I used was the first name or the last name of the actual Penguin in Batman, but I might be wrong there. Forget the actual Cobblepot. Cobblepot is his name.
Oswald Cobblepot is the comic character. Yeah.
Old and he's put up eyes, but looks to me like it's Oswald. But maybe I'm wrong. I may have changed it at the last minute. But initially, I think I had Oswald. He's like, my name's Oswald or something like that. I may have changed it.
Toward the end of the book, we meet this absolutely vile character.
Yeah. Who was real?
Who was real? Yeah, can't imagine.
Do you guys want to talk about him? I mean,
Yeah. Please, Scott and Brendan, tell me about this guy.
George Hunter White. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon. He was
when we kind of uncovered the Operation Midnight Climax, that's when we were introduced to him. And again, like I was saying in the research, it would just be, they would mention, you'd see this name, George Hunter White, and maybe a sentence or two, something, and then so then you'd copy that, Google that, see where that leads, and eventually we just uncovered this pretty wild character. I mean, he was a narc, but he was well connected. One of those just like hardcore cops. There's no moral elements.
Completely corrupt.
Yeah. And he was huge, and he had like a bowling ball, and he knew everybody in town, and he could just basically set the whole thing, everything they wanted to do, as unethical as any of it was. This was your guy. He'll make it happen. He found the pimp that brought in the prostitutes, and if any of them got busted, then they had a little hand, like a pocket full of these. They called them chits, and it's like a get out of jail free card. And they just hand that to the cop, and you're back on the street, no questions asked. So one of those kinds of guys. And then Stewart took him, and like he does everything, it just blew him up into this huge silvery doughboy kind of Mr. Clean dude.
Enormous evil baby.
That page right there is crazy.
Yeah.
with a predilection to dress up like a sailor.
Yeah.
What does it say in the bottom corner? I can't even read that.
I think what it says is that it corrects the quote. So the quote in the script says Uncle Sam,
which is an actual quote from that dude.
Yeah. But
we just changed instead of with the blessing of
the all highest.
We
all highest. Yeah.
We changed the all highest.
Uncle Sam, just so they would know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
All that says at the bottom there is it says this quote. We changed 2 words here. The actual quote, and we're not changing rape. We're not changing murder or whatever the other evil things he's claiming to do. We're changing the all highest to Uncle Sam.
Yeah. Because to me, when I read that quote, it sounded to me like it could be construed as he's talking about God, but I think he means like Uncle Sam is really what he means. Like that's the all highest. We got the
for him,
of the CIA. We can do whatever we want. We're untouchable. But we just changed it so it wouldn't be confusing.
Cool.
And I don't want any blasphemy going on either. We don't do that.
Everything else is on the table, though.
Totally.
I had that ha coming out of his mouth like flies, like he's opening his mouth, and it's like I can just imagine all the laughter coming out and being dominant and breathing into your face. But also, I just thought, wouldn't it be great if it was like hundreds of flies kind of coming out of his mouth?
Now we meet this guy at the tail end of Volume 1, and as I was reading through this, so the title of this book is MK Ultra, Sex, Drugs, and CIA, and I'm like, okay, we got the drugs. Oh yeah, here's the CIA. Well, where's all the sex? And it's not till the last 10 pages or something. All of a sudden, it's like, whoa, because of this guy right here. And I wanted to show a page of some of that, but it's like some of those they're not appropriate to show on the screen here. So I got this one here.
No, that's cool. I can tell you something about this. It's interesting. So I think it's interesting. The safe house, the brothel for Midnight Climax in San Francisco has a particular address which I can't quite remember offhand. But I looked it up on the internet, and I discovered it had been turned into a swanky apartment. And you could do virtual tours of the apartment. So that's the actual interior, the top panel of the apartment, and the actual view across the bay.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got that from and the funny thing about the real estate agent was they make no mention of its amazing history. Like this is a nice place, $11 million or something like that.
Should be a selling point.
Yeah. The best way to sell a house is say it's haunted. The best way to sell a pub is say it's haunted. They'll sell it.
There you go. I love this guy. I love the pimp you have in the bottom corner here, Mr. Roach.
Yeah, that's another real character.
He looks like a Dick Tracy villain with his skin melting or whatever.
Yeah, I got pictures of the real guy, and so he's not a million miles off of that, but he is more Dick Tracy, and I really wanted to make him vile looking, you know. And I just every time I look at that page, I laugh because because the other guys are like, "Whatever you say, Mr. Roach." You know?
Oh man,
it's like 5'2" in a zoot suit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the way they're like, "Who the fuck is this?" We're an international broadcast, but yeah, who's this guy? And then they're like, "I'm the guy bringing the prostitutes." And they're like, "Oh, okay." You know, the alarm followed by, "Oh, okay, really
Totally.
Oh, the new cover, yeah.
So here, this is the cover to Volume 2, and so weird. I love it. A very stark contrast to Volume 1, because Volume 1's cover had just the scientist's face, normal, and then this one is like, no, this is what the book's actually about here, right here.
Yeah, because this is the second half of this insanity. So the first cover is Mr.
All
Hoffman.
lead up.
Dr. Hoffman takes the acid, and it's the same face essentially. But when I was reading you can get for anyone listening, you can get the Senate report into MK Ultra, so you can read all this transcripts. It's fascinating reading, and in there they talk about various secret weapons and strange things that they did. And one of the things that jumped out at me was the glass skull. There was a glass skull that they used to test concussion weapons, and they would fill it with smoke and would fire sonic blasts from a special concussion gun, which would knock people out from a distance. And they would study how the smoke moved and see that would jostle the brain, and that should lead to unconsciousness and so forth. So that's what that is. That's the glass skull. But the smoke that's going into it is coming from a joint, and the whole bottom part of that is Woodstock. And you'll see that's Carlos Santana playing his guitar.
Yeah.
Now the story with Santana was, and by the way, that's Jerry Garcia on the other side there. So we're kind of coming full circle from Brandon and Scott here in Garcia's interview. So Garcia came up to Santana. This is the story. Santana turned up at Woodstock. It was like maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and he said, "When do I go on?" And they said, "You don't go until 2 in the morning." And Garcia turned up and said, "I've got some LSD if you want it." And he said, I don't want to be too. He said, "No, you'll be fine. You don't go until 2 in the morning." So they gave him the LSD. And as soon as he dropped it, someone said, "Santana, Carlos, you're on." You know, so he immediately went on stage, and he said this story. I saw an interview with him. He was saying he felt like he was wrestling a sort of blue electric snake, but it was his guitar, and he was trying to control it. So that's what the snake around him is all about.
Wow.
It's what I mean. There's so much going on just in this one panel. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, who's this dude back here with like the suit behind Jerry Garcia?
Oh, that's this yeah. Just a sort of typical kind of agent guy, you know. Like there's a few dotted around guys who just don't look like they belong. They're kind of like watching,
That's cool.
Yeah, and all the stuff around the sides is meant to be different kind of ways of interfering with the mind. So you've got like electrical, you've got radio, you've got a crocodile clip on the ear, you've got some other thing, and then in the red, if you look back there, you'll see that that's some of the protest that was going on in America at the time.
Oh yeah.
The civil rights protests and various other things. So, you know, I just kind of my way of trying to show, while some very important things were going on, these assholes were running around dosing people with drugs and trying to develop some crazy technologies. But, you know, real things could have been going on. This was government, you know, at its most insane. Meanwhile, there's people calling for real positive change, and those are there in the background. So that's kind of what the thinking was as I put the picture together.
Now we've got a special treat for this volume. Tell me about this, Stewart.
Okay, so this is a kind of a reveal because the previous book. Okay, so thanks goes to Robbie Robbins and Hank Casella, because Robbie came up with the idea of doing a blacklight for the first volume, and blacklight was a popular late 60s, early 70s kind of thing to do. So
like rock and roll posters and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it chimes with that era, you know. But that was kind of an accident from my point of view until Hank said, "Why don't we do 3D anaglyph for the second volume special edition?" So then I realized, oh God, then we've got the 2 eras. We've got optical illusion in 2 eras. We've got the blacklight of the 70s, and we've got the the anaglyph that was so popular with the 3D glasses back in the 50s. So it's really perfect nesting and kind of an accident, I think, unless those guys figured it out themselves. Their idea is I just make the artwork in the case of the two covers, because I didn't know how far I could go with making artwork, and they both came up with these optics. So both of these are 3D anaglyph that I've been working on, and this is one from late in the story on volume 2. And I really like, I mean, it's so hard to do this. I'm not very good at it, but I've really made some progress with this one. So when you put the 3D glasses on, and if anyone at home that's watching this has a pair of 3D glasses, put them on now. You can actually, the image should pop for you. You should see the guy in the background firing the gun is way at the back. The guy who's got him in that blue-white shirt, he's kind of in the middle. And way up forefront, you should see the bullet kind of coming out a little bit at you.
Nice.
So yeah, so I'm really pleased with that one. So I'm going to do some anaglyph prints, and we're going to do a 3D anaglyph cover for the special edition of the second volume. So that's what that is. Thanks for showing that, Curtis.
Yeah, no problem. That's very cool. That's so awesome. So now we're moving into some preview art for volume 2. I don't think we need. I don't want to dwell too much on these. I just want to kind of show everybody what to expect. Some more of the loony bizarreness. But but can you just briefly give us an overview of where is the story going? If you've read volume 1, where is the story going in volume 2?
Well, a simple way of saying it is this is the darker second half, but because it's LSD, it's much more colorful. So it's a much more colorful, darker second half. It gets really dark here because this is where they've established the brothel, all sorts of uncomfortable, horrible, nasty things start happening. That image there is meant to symbolize the fact that the guy who's talking to him gets through him. They're waiting at a light, it's red. He decides he believes what the guy's saying, and the light turns green.
Ah, cool.
Yeah, that's the point at which he decides to work against his friend. So, yeah. Oh, and this is interesting because this is an actual Russian Moscow's subway, and the statue she's reaching out to is a famous statue that people all touch because it's made of something like brass or something like this, and they all touch the dog's nose. So if you go to Moscow, there's this dog's nose, and it's very shiny, it's very colorful. But everything else is quite dark because so many people have touched the nose. So that's what she's doing. She's reaching out, she's touching the dog's nose. That's that, and well, boyfriend is getting shot in the back of the head. So that's that. Wow. And this is a real donut shop in San Francisco. That it was there back in the day. So we have a donut shop in the script. So I was looking for a real one, and Bob's was the one. And,
there you go.
And then in the background, I've got a guy that's heading to the donut shop, but he's floating. He's not actually, don't ask me why. And in the foreground, you get two figures, one of which is Morris Mule, which is my first published comic here in Prague, in the Prague Post. And Morris is talking to somebody there. Up in the roof, up in the windows there, you've got a kind of strange party taking place. And I really like those two characters. I just made them up, and then I thought, oh, God, I need to do something with them, you know. So I'll maybe get around to that at some point. But, yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Great.
And this page, okay, so I wanted to show the most famous street in San Francisco, which is this one. I forget the name of it.
Lombard Street.
Yeah,
Lombard.
exactly. And it's got this wonderful sort of wavy quality. But I thought, how do I do it without it being kind of cliche and everything? And then I realized drone shots. So we've got, if you imagine Seymour is being talked to by this guy, he's being pulled this way and that. If you think of it in terms of the psychology he's going through, he's being pulled this way and that. And so they go down Lombard, and by the time they get to the bottom of Lombard, he's definitely on board to help the bad guys. I shouldn't say that maybe, but that gives it away. So, and then the other panels are subverted versions of panels we've seen before. There's a panel at the end of volume 1 where we're watching the TV, and it's a family setting, but now that same TV, that exact same panel has been subverted. And we see it in sinister light. It's not that family home we're in. It's now some other apartment. And so there's a bunch of little things going on there that are kind of just playing with the images that I did before in volume 1.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is, when I drew this, I thought, oh, you know what? We need to get Rosie O'Donnell to play this part if we make a film, because she would be fantastic. The thing about this guy is he's such a macho man. He's such a macho man. He's such a hater. It would be great to have a woman play him, you know? I think fantastic. Or the first person I thought about was somebody like Divine, you know, who would be amazing. But of course, Divine passed away many years ago. But then I was thinking, right, maybe get somebody like Rosie O'Donnell or to do the British pantomime thing of having a woman play a male part. I think it would just be fantastic, especially huge, and his voice was really, high. I think that would be really funny.
This is another like Dick Tracy type character with the small facial features and stuff.
He was a really, really nasty piece of work, and always macho, always super tough, always doing horrible things. And so, but he also had this thing where he would go dressed as a sailor to try and coerce people back to the brothel, men, other sailors. And so I just had to run with that. I thought that's funny. It's like it's too close to. He doesn't know. He maybe hasn't analyzed himself well enough. He hasn't looked into his heart, so to speak.
Oh man,
good stuff.
Oh, this little guy here on the boat, he pops up everywhere. He's always in the background. The first time we see him, he's in Chinatown, way in the background, smoking a cigarette. He's just this oddball that's always there for anyone who might feel paranoid. Like if you ever thought you might be followed, you look around, or you go out one day and you have the same guy 2 or 3 times. You're like, that's weird. Why am I seeing that guy? He just pops up everywhere. He turns up in dream sequences, and he's just a sort of symbol of paranoia. Oh, this is okay. So this is a reveal in a way, because it's when they find the body in the crate and it's in the reservoir. But the way we find the body in the crate is, as we're talking, we go into a cocktail drink.
That's what it looks like. You see the olive here.
Yeah. So the olive, in this case, we're in the reservoir now, but the olive is still in the reservoir. So the massive olive on its stick. So that's what that is. It's a page we go in and in and in and in.
Great visual cue.
Yeah, this is City Lights, the famous bookstore in San Francisco. So I did try and put as many references to famous sites as possible. This is an astonishing poster that was popular.
Yeah,
incredible. It really, that was the real line. They used it in the 50s and they used it again in the very early 70s.
But that was real. That's crazy.
Again, blinkers. They're not looking at it. This is a reference to. This is my homage to
Harriman, George Harriman.
Exactly, Crazy Cat. So that's my kind of, and the Pentagon Papers had kind of come out, so I've been out for a while, but so funny Pentagon Papers rather than funny papers, and we go into the whole thing about Nazis, changing their appearance and working on the U.S. Taxpayers funded payroll. So and it's not just people who worked for the Wehrmacht or whatever. These are really SS people who murdered and killed and tortured. And it really appalls me. And I know I've made light of it, but it's truly appalling. And I can't believe that more people aren't making a big deal about it. This guy, Israel found out that he had worked for the CIA. So they asked America, where is he? They were like, I don't know where he is. But he'd gone back to Germany for a while, and then he went back to Germany, took a professorship. This is Kurt Plotner again, the skeleton from earlier on. He took a professorship in Freiburg. So he worked for the University of Freiburg until the end of his life, or end of his career, and passed away in peace and relative wealth. So horrible.
Crazy.
And this is a page that's meant to be about kind of, how, so you'll read these or you hear conspiracy theories, and there's various kind of unrelated seeming events, and people will tie them together, or they'll tie the most ludicrous things together. So I was trying to think of a way to do that. And in this case, I thought if I do the story that I'm sharing here as a sort of something you can only really read at a diagonal, rather than read left to right, you read down in the diagonal, you start to get snippets of the story. It starts to make sense if you look at it diagonally. So left to right, it's like, doesn't make any sense, but diagonally, it's like, oh, okay, that's starting to make a bit of sense. Again,
Unreal.
The glass skull and everything is there. So, this is Sharon Tate.
This just blows my mind here.
This dream sequence, one of the characters falls asleep, and I was trying to think of a way to wake him up in a kind of interesting way, and I'd been working in the background trying to think of a way to do a face. Nothing to do with MK Ultra, just thinking about faces and how to do a face that would be interesting. And then I was thinking about MK Ultra and this dream sequence, and I thought, Sharon Tate, So what I really wanted in that scene was to have the radio playing as he wakes up and he hears about the Manson trial. So he's hearing that in his subconscious, and that's why he thinks of the face. But I didn't put it in. But I did open it up. I did open up the dream, or end the dream with him seeing this. So
You posted this on your Facebook page,
Yeah.
and people really do need to go there and zoom in on this image because
crazy.
the incredible detail is like this whole picture is just made up of blocks. It's just
Yeah.
blocks of different sizes and shapes, and it's
Yeah.
like, how did you go about visualizing this, Stewart?
So I had an idea that this might work, and then I had to sit down and try and do it. But then as I started drawing the blocks, I realized that it was going to be maybe a week before I would know if it was working, because you know, I'm building it out of my own kind of Lego or whatever in my mind and sort of putting it together. So I did the eye, and then I started to look at it, and I was like, the eye is working. So I thought, okay, but it still wasn't out of the woods. I wasn't out of the woods, because if you're doing a face, it can be if it's slightly off in any way, it's not going to work. So this is all made of blocks, so I had to be really careful. So once I got the eyes right, and by the way, that's a tip for any artist, get the eyes right. Once you get the eyes right, you can kind of open up a bit. So once I had the eyes, I thought, oh, it's kind of working. It is kind of working. Then I was like concerned about the nose and lips and all that kind of stuff. But it started to work. But that page took a month.
I am not surprised.
I believe it.
Yep.
So, you know, Brandon and Scott were asking me about what the work was going like. And I was like, well, most pages are a couple of days, whatever. But there's been 1 or 2 pages that took a month, and that was one of them.
Yeah. Oh boy. It looks fantastic, though. It's just incredible. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all we have for our preview of MK Ultra Volume 2. We've been on for an hour now, so I kind of want to wrap up, but I want to give people an opportunity, Scott and Brandon and Stewart, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of plug any future projects that are coming up, stuff that you want to, or anything that you want to just tell people about to look out for.
I may have sent a Dread picture, but I'm going to put that on the line after this. Yeah, there you go. So that's the reveal for A Dread that I'm doing did for 2008, which is coming out on July 13th. It's 10 pages. That's one panel, and it's just an idea of the detail in one panel. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm working on a new version of Macbeth and a bunch of other little things and stuff. So, but yeah, that's my thing.
And you send me this picture as well.
That's a frontispiece I did for the 2008 art book, which celebrates the creators of the comic book.
Yeah, nice.
Cool.
Scott, how about you?
For me, it's really my greatest hope right now is for more people to get their hands on this graphic novel. It's challenging to market things like this and get them out there, but I think it's so well done, and Stewart's work is just so incredible. It needs to be seen by more people, and obviously, Brandon, I want to see a show get made, but I think that possibly begins by this graphic novel getting some more traction out there in the world. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, love to see the show version or movie version, and then parallel worlds. I guess just follow. You can always find me on Facebook, Brandon Beckner. Because I'm probably going to rebrand the movie as a possible name change and completely different poster. So, and it's maybe a couple months away from being done, but that's
cool.
That's my main thing right now.
And
thanks for doing this, Curtis. It's cool.
Yeah, not a problem. How about do you have any websites or any way that they can find you on social media? Brandon, you already said your Facebook page. Where else can they find you?
I don't really do a lot of Twitter, but I got Parrot Poet 1. Okay. And I get an Instagram. That's probably the best way now until we kind of finally. I mean, I do have a website, brandonbeckner.com, but I'm not really doing a lot with it.
Okay. How about you,
Ultra's
Scott?
got a Facebook. Well, MK Ultra has a Facebook page that probably should have more action out there. And
that's probably the best place to follow MK Ultra, right?
Facebook. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I just realized, Curtis, that I'm losing light, so I'm.
Yeah, it's not time for you.
Is that on purpose?
It's bedtime for Stewart.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Cool. Sorry, Scott, did you have a website?
We just primarily communicate through Facebook. Those two pages, my name and with MK Ultra.
Perfect. And how about you, Stewart?
Yeah, I've got StewartKMoore.com, which is introduction to the work, and I do, and takes you to the book link and whatnot, and of course the MK Ultra Facebook page, and I've got Oppipop at Oppipop on Twitter. So I just post a bunch of stuff. I'm Buddha von Budstein on Instagram, so I post art up there and videos of me drawing and stuff, so you get to see the work being made. So that's all up on Instagram, Buddha von Budstein.
Excellent.
Or follow my cat, which is Flaky von Flickstein.
Very important. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Essential.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank the three of you for being here. This was a fantastic look into this absolutely insane story. For those of you who haven't read this book, you do need to check it out, especially if you were interested in anything that we were talking about today. What we were saying doesn't do the story justice until you actually read it and like, holy cow, this actually happened. What? And you can go to cloverpress.us. And you can find MK Ultra on there. You can get more information, and you can order a copy for yourself or order it through your comic shop or bookstore or wherever as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stewart. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Curtis.
Yeah, not a problem.
Fantastic.
All right. Have
Great.
a good one, guys.
We'll
Great
see
talk.
you